When we think of history's greatest generals, certain names immediately come to mind: Napoleon, Hannibal, Alexander the Great, Caesar. But what about those who deserve a place on this prestigious list yet don't receive the recognition they deserve? Or perhaps those whose reputations fall short of their true accomplishments? Here, we are going to look at some of history's underrated generals. William Slim is probably one of the most underrated generals of World War II. His efforts to reorganize and retrain his forces, coupled with his innovative tactics, turned a demoralized and retreating army into a formidable force that achieved a decisive victory over the Japanese. William Slim assumed command of the Burma Corps in 1942. The situation was dire. The Japanese, highly trained and equipped for jungle warfare, had launched a rapid and devastating advance through Southeast Asia, forcing the British into retreat. Slim inherited a poorly coordinated force that suffered from low morale, insufficient training, and inadequate supplies. The retreat through Burma was one of the most grueling episodes in World War II. Slim's forces, along with thousands of civilians, trekked through jungle terrain, often under attack, to escape into India. Despite the chaos, Slim demonstrated remarkable leadership, maintaining cohesion and ensuring the survival of many of his troops, who might have otherwise have been lost. Slim recognized that the army needed fundamental changes in organization, tactics, and mindset in order to overcome the Japanese. His first priority was to address the army's logistical challenges. Operating in the dense jungles of Burma required innovative solutions to ensure troops were adequately supplied. Slim worked closely with logistical experts to develop an air supply system, enabling the army to remain mobile and sustained even in remote areas. This system became a cornerstone of the campaign's eventual success. Slim also focused on improving the army's morale and combat readiness. Recognizing that his troops needed to overcome the psychological dominance the Japanese had established, he prioritized training in jungle warfare, ambush tactics, and small unit operations. Troops were taught to operate independently and to use the jungle to their advantage rather than to fear it. Slim's most important change was the introduction of a new strategic doctrine. Troops were trained to establish defensive boxes, fortified positions that could be resupplied by air and supported with close airstrikes and armored units. These defensive boxes were designed to counter Japanese infiltration tactics that previously decimated supply lines and dominated earlier stages of the war. The pivotal moment of Slim's command came in 1944 with the battles of Imphal and Kohima, often referred to as the Stalingrad of the East. The Japanese had launched Operation Yugo, a massive offensive aimed at capturing Imphal and cutting off British forces in Burma from India. The success of this operation would have threatened British control of the region and provided the Japanese with a strategic foothold in South Asia. Slim anticipated the Japanese strategy and prepared his forces for a defensive campaign. At Imphal and Kohima, British and Indian troops held their ground against the Japanese. Slim's new tactics, defense in depth, superior coordination between ground forces and air support, and the defensive boxes proved decisive. The battles were characterized by intense combat, including brutal close-quarters fighting. Although encircled, Slim's forces fought with determination, bolstered by their innovative tactics and newfound confidence in jungle warfare. They inflicted devastating losses on the Japanese. By July 1944, the Japanese offensive had been decisively repelled. The battles marked a turning point in the Burma campaign, as the Japanese suffered irreparable losses in manpower and morale. Following the victories at Imphal and Kohima, Slim launched a counteroffensive to reclaim Burma. His forces, now battle-hardened and well-equipped, pushed southward with a combination of aggressive maneuvers and relentless pressure. Slim recognized the weaknesses in Japanese logistics and understood that the Burma campaign was not a top priority for Allied command. Aware that reinforcements were unlikely, he concluded that the best strategy was to outmaneuver and bypass Japanese positions whenever possible. This approach aimed to cut off their supplies and leave them to succumb to hunger, minimizing the need for direct combat and avoiding casualties he could not afford. Slim's strategy capitalized on the weaknesses exposed in the Japanese army during their failed offensive. With their air support ensuring a steady supply chain, the 14th Army maintained its momentum. The campaign culminated in the capture of Rangoon in May 1945, effectively ending Japanese control of Burma. William Slim's leadership of the 14th Army was a masterclass in overcoming adversity. His ability to reorganize a demoralized and fragmented force, adapt strategy and logistics to the unique challenges of jungle warfare, and inspire his troops to achieve the seemingly impossible has earned him a place among history's greatest military leaders. But the Burma campaign is often dismissed as a sideshow to the larger conflict in Europe and the Pacific. By the end of the war, the 14th Army was known as the Forgotten Army, and Slim doesn't get the same recognition as generals in other theatres of war. If his accomplishments were in Europe, he would be a household name like Patton or Montgomery. When the Roman Empire's rise is discussed, Augustus often takes centre stage. However, Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa, Augustus' trusted general and friend, was the strategic mastermind who turned his ambitions into reality. Despite his critical role in shaping the empire, Agrippa remains an underappreciated figure in history. Agrippa's career is inseparable from Octavian's rise. Born to a modest family, Agrippa's intelligence and loyalty quickly earned him Octavian's trust. He handled military campaigns and political crises with unmatched competence, becoming indispensable to Rome's future emperor. One of Agrippa's first major contributions was during the turbulent period following Julius Caesar's assassination, during the Sicilian campaign from 42 to 36 BC. Sextus Pompey, son of Caesar's enemy Pompey the Great, had taken control of Sicily and wielded a large fleet in which he threatened Rome. This is where Agrippa first displayed his leadership abilities, his tactical acumen, and his logistical prowess. To keep his preparations a secret, Agrippa built Port Julius, a concealed port by connecting two lakes to the sea via canals. He trained 20,000 oarsmen and thousands of marines, and he also transformed naval warfare with the invention of the harpax. Unlike the traditional corvus, a boarding bridge, the harpax was a grappling device launched from a ballista, enabling Roman ships to haul enemy ships closer for boarding at greater distances. With his fleet prepared, Agrippa set sail and encountered and beat Sextus's forces on two different occasions. First, on August 11, 36 BC at the Battle of Mylae, but Sextus' forces were able to withdraw with only 30 ships lost. The decisive blow came a few weeks later on September 3rd at the Battle of Naulochus. Both forces numbered around 300 ships. Agrippa again displayed his tactical genius. He maneuvered his ships in such a way that hemmed Sextus's forces in, nullifying their agility advantage. It was a devastating victory. Only 17 of Sextus's ships escaped. Agrippa only lost 3 ships. The impact of the harpax was apparent. Of all the ships Sextus lost, only 28 were lost by ramming. The rest were either captured or set alight. But his magnum opus was yet to come. As Rome descended into civil war once again when Octavius declared war on Cleopatra and his former ally Antony, Agrippa's services were once again called for. Antony established his camp in Greece. Confident in his naval superiority, he decided to remain on the defensive, allowing Octavius to make the first move. Predicting that Octavius would need to sail from Italy to engage him, Antony prepared an ambush targeting the vulnerable transport ships. Agrippa, however, detected the trap and devised a counter-strategy. Instead of engaging directly, he led a substantial naval force around southwestern Greece, bypassing fortified towns to seize the city of Methone. From this strategic base, Agrippa launched raids on surrounding areas, compelling Antony to react to protect his supply lines. This diversion worked flawlessly, enabling Octavius to land his forces safely in northern Greece. Antony was reluctant to leave his fortified position as his strategy was to make Octavius come to him, but now Octavius could bide his time. Agrippa capitalized on the stalemate by launching a series of coastal raids. These raids proved highly effective, allowing him to capture several fortified towns and nearly destroying Antony's supply lines. With each success, the morale of Octavius' forces soared, while Antony's troops suffered from dwindling provisions, hunger, and disease. With his forces demoralized and rapidly shrinking, Antony was forced to commit to a decisive battle, either on land or at sea. Perhaps swayed by Cleopatra, he opted for a naval confrontation. Antony positioned his forces at the mouth of the Gulf, hoping to lure Octavian's fleet into a bottleneck attack. However, Agrippa, fully aware of Antony's desperation, issued strict orders to hold position, confident that Antony would eventually be forced to strike. When Antony finally advanced, the battle erupted. Cleopatra's fleet remained in reserve. The fighting was intense, with powerful ballistae on many ships raining destruction on decks and targeting rowers. Despite Octavius' forces appearing to gain the upper hand, Capturing each of Antony's ships was a grueling task, and the battle raged for hours. As the battle seemed lost, Cleopatra's fleet, held in reserve, spotted a gap in the lines. Raising her sails, her ships escaped towards Egypt. Seeing this, Antony abandoned the fight, boarding a smaller vessel and following her through the gap. His departure marked the end of any real, effective resistance. The remaining fleet was destroyed or captured, leaving Octavius as the undisputed ruler. Agrippa was an exceptional general in every regard. Politically adept, he aligned himself with Octavius, becoming indispensable while never challenging Octavius' authority. His logistical expertise was unparalleled, as demonstrated by his ability to construct a secret port and an entire fleet within just 2 years. As a leader, he trained thousands of men and guided them to repeated victories. Strategically, Agrippa excelled not only in defeating enemies on the battlefield, but also in devising plans that strategically weakened them before the fighting even began. Without Agrippa, there may have never been an Augustus, and the Roman Empire as we know it would have looked drastically different or may never have existed. When discussing underrated military leaders, Nathanael Greene emerges as a figure whose brilliance reshaped the course of the American Revolution. Commanding the Continental forces in the South, Greene not only reversed the British advances in the southern colonies, but also demonstrated an acute understanding of unconventional warfare that secured his place among the Revolution's most pivotal strategists. By the time Greene assumed command of the southern forces in late 1780, the British had achieved their greatest successes of the war. General Charles Cornwallis controlled Savannah and Charleston, and the Continental Army in the south was all but annihilated following the devastating defeat at Camden under Horatio Gates. The British appeared poised to solidify the control over the southern colonies. Washington, recognizing the gravity of the situation, turned to Greene, who had proven himself a resourceful and capable commander. Greene was one of Washington's most trusted generals. He played critical roles in numerous campaigns. During the Philadelphia campaign, Greene's leadership at the Battle of Brandywine bought the Continental Army precious time to avoid greater losses. His logistical acumen as quartermaster general at Valley Forge ensured the army was better supplied and prepared, complementing the training reforms of Baron von Steuben. Greene's approach to warfare marked a radical departure from conventional tactics. With his army outnumbered and outgunned, Greene devised a Fabian strategy to emphasize mobility, evasion, and attrition over direct confrontation. Dividing his forces, Greene orchestrated a campaign that lured the British into the Carolina backwoods, far from the loyalist strongholds along the coast. While Cornwallis claimed tactical victories, they were Pyrrhic victories in nature, exacting heavy casualties on his troops and stretching his supply lines to the breaking point. The culmination of Greene's southern strategy unfolded at the Battle of Guilford Courthouse in March 1781. Following a series of tactical retreats, Greene's forces confronted Lord Cornwallis in a fierce 90-minute engagement. Although Greene chose to withdraw from the battlefield, the British suffered heavy losses, casualties amounting to nearly a quarter of their troops. This Pyrrhic victory left Cornwallis' army depleted and unable to pursue Greene, forcing them to retreat to Wilmington. From there, Cornwallis marched to Virginia, unwillingly setting the stage for his ultimate defeat at Yorktown later that year. While Cornwallis moved north, Greene turned his attention back to the south, determined to wrest control of the region from the British. Later that year, Greene's strategy bore fruit again at the Battle of Eutaw Springs in September 1781, one of the final major engagements in the south. Greene's forces launched a determined assault on British forces under Colonel Alexander Stewart. The battle was fiercely contested, with both sides suffering significant casualties. Though tactically inconclusive, Eutaw Springs marked a strategic turning point. The British, unable to hold their ground, retreated to Charleston, effectively ceding much of the interior to the Continental forces. In recognition of his success, Congress awarded Greene a gold medal after the Battle of Eutaw Springs. Recognizing that he was not the most adept tactical commander, Greene crafted a strategy that compensated for his limitations while capitalizing on British vulnerabilities. His ability to adapt and outmaneuver the enemy on a broader strategic level ultimately turned the tide of the Southern campaign in favor of the Continental forces, paving the way for the eventual restoration of Continental authority across South Carolina and Georgia. Greene's legacy remains overshadowed by figures like Washington, Lafayette, and Cornwallis. This oversight stems from several factors. Unlike other generals, Greene lacked a single decisive battlefield triumph. His victories were strategic rather than tactical, and his most significant accomplishment, the reconquest of the south, was a prolonged campaign rather than a singular event, and overshadowed by the siege of Yorktown, which is only possible because of Greene. Furthermore, Greene's untimely death in 1786, just 3 years after the war's conclusion, deprived him of the opportunity to participate in the shaping of the fledgling American Republic. Now, I don't think Greene was one of the greatest generals. He was tactically too weak for that, but he definitely deserves a greater reputation than he currently holds. Jan Žižka stands among history's elite military commanders, renowned for his undefeated record on the battlefield. He was born around 1360 in Bohemia. A childhood incident left him blind in one eye, and later in life he would lose sight in the other, earning him the moniker the Blind General. Žižka first gained prominence serving under John Sokol, a Bohemian noble. In 1410, he participated in the Battle of Grunwald, where the Polish-Lithuanian alliance defeated the Teutonic Knights. By 1411, Žižka had entered the service of Queen Sophia of Bohemia as a bodyguard. It was during this time he encountered Jan Hus, a reformist priest whose ideals profoundly influenced him. Hus denounced papal corruption and insisted that supreme authority lay in the Bible, a radical stance that led to his excommunication in 1411. When Hus was burned at the stake in 1415 for heresy, his death ignited widespread outrage among his followers, the Hussites, and solidified Žižka's commitment to their cause. The Hussite movement became a beacon of resistance against both the Catholic Church and Emperor Sigismund, whom they had responsible for Hus's execution. Žižka's leadership came to the forefront during the first defenestration of Prague in 1419, when Hussite protesters threw Catholic councillors from a window, sparking a rebellion. King Wenceslaus IV's death shortly after this event left Sigismund poised to claim the Bohemian crown. However, the Hussites resisted his rule, setting the stage for years of conflict. Žižka's ability to innovate was crucial in overcoming the Hussites' disadvantages in resources and training. He transformed peasant tools, such as threshers, into flails and introduced war wagons fortified with planks and loopholes for crossbows and firearms. Each war wagon was manned by a team of 20 soldiers, including 2 armed drivers, 6 crossbowmen, 2 handgunners, 4 flail-wielding infantry, 4 halberdiers, and 2 shield-bearers. As enemy cavalry charged, the crossbowmen and handgunners unleashed a volley of deadly fire, dismounting many attackers. Once the riders were unhorsed, the infantry armed with flails and halberds moved in, delivering devastating blows to neutralizing the remaining threat. Žižka revolutionized battlefield tactics by organizing these wagons into square formations known as a wagenburg or a wagon fort. This defensive square provided both protection and a lethal platform for counterattacks, allowing his forces to withstand and repel even the most formidable assaults. In one of his first major victories, Žižka defended the town of Neckmere against a royalist force 5 times larger than his own. Using war wagons strategically, his 400 infantry defeated 2,000 cavalry, making the first recorded use of this tactic. When Pope Martin V called for a crusade against the Hussites in 420, Žižka was appointed the movement's military leader. At the Battle of Sudomir, he used drained fish ponds and war wagons to neutralize the royalist force, further enhancing his reputation. Later that year, Žižka defended Prague from Sigismund's massive crusading army of 80,000 troops. Recognizing the strategic importance of Witkov Hill, Žižka fortified it and repelled an assault by 8,000 crusaders. His success forced Sigismund to abandon his campaign. Despite losing his remaining eye during the siege, Žižka continued to lead with unparalleled strategic insight. The Blind General depended on detailed intelligence about enemy movements and the terrain and devised his battlefield strategies. In all, Žižka fought in 9 major battles and won all of them. In 1424, he launched a campaign to liberate Moravia. Before crossing the border, he fell ill while besieging a royalist castle and died on October 11, 1424, likely of the plague. Žižka's legacy endures as a testament to his ingenuity and leadership. He transformed peasant militias into disciplined forces capable of defeating well-equipped armies. His use of war wagons, emphasis on terrain, and strict military discipline revolutionized medieval warfare. Despite commanding troops often outnumbered and outmatched, Žižka never lost a battle. Ascending to the throne in 359 BC, Philip inherited a kingdom teetering on the brink of collapse. Yet through a combination of military genius, strategic diplomacy, and an unyielding vision, Philip transformed his kingdom into a dominant power, setting the stage for his son, Alexander the Great, to forge an empire. Macedon was encircled by hostile forces, including the Thracians, Illyrians, Paeonians, and Athenians, all poised to strike. However, Philip skillfully neutralized these threats through a combination of strategic bribery and diplomatic marriages, effectively buying his kingdom the time it needed to recover and strengthen. During this brief respite, Philip began overhauling Macedon's military. He reorganized the army, introduced innovations that would become the hallmark of his reign. Chief among these was the development of the Macedonian phalanx, a formation that revolutionized ancient warfare. Philip's introduction of the sarissa spear was a seemingly simple yet transformative innovation. By doubling the spear's length, he effectively doubled the distance between his soldiers and the enemy's weapons. The extraordinary length of the sarissa also allowed additional rows of phalangites to project their spears forward, forming multiple layers of defense. This configuration created a nearly impenetrable barrier, rendering the Macedonian phalanx a dominant force in the battlefield. In addition to infantry tactics, Philip enhanced the effectiveness of his cavalry by establishing the companion cavalry. This elite unit was composed of the Macedonian aristocracy and often led personally by the king in battle. His first major victory came against the Illyrians in 358 BC. Leading his troops personally, Philip decisively defeated the Illyrian king, liberating Macedon from Illyrian dominance and reclaiming lost territories. This victory not only solidified his rule, but also boosted the morale of his subjects, who began to view Philip as the savior of their beleaguered kingdom. With Macedon's borders secure, Philip turned the attention to expansion and consolidation, and more military victories followed over the years, and Macedon's borders grew. Philip's military successes were matched by his extraordinary diplomatic acumen. Recognizing the importance of alliances, he used marriage as a tool of statecraft. Over the course of his reign, Philip married multiple times, forging bonds with powerful neighbours and neutralizing potential threats. For instance, his marriage to Olympia of Epirus brought an important ally into Macedon's sphere of influence and produced his heir Alexander. Philip also cultivated alliances through negotiation and bribery, understanding that diplomacy could achieve what war could not. Philip's most famous military campaigns were those that brought all of Greece under his control. His strategic brilliance was on full display during the Battle of Chaeronea in 338 BC. Facing a coalition of Greek city-states led by Athens and Thebes, Philip and his young son Alexander commanded the Macedonian army to decisive victory. This victory marked the end of the Greek city-states' independence and the beginning of Macedonian hegemony. To solidify his dominance, Philip established the League of Corinth, a federation of Greek city-states united under Macedonian leadership. Though nominally an alliance, the League was effectively a mechanism for Philip to control Greece while maintaining the illusion of autonomy. During the reign of Philip, the once peripheral kingdom of Macedon rose to dominate the Greek world in just a quarter century, a transformation driven by Philip's visionary leadership and transformative policies. Without Philip's groundwork, the achievements of his son Alexander the Great would have been unthinkable. Alexander's legendary conquest relied heavily on the military innovations of his father and a politically unified Greece that Philip brought under Macedonian control. Alexander's fame has largely overshadowed Philip's legacy, but the elder king is equally, if not more so, deserving of the title, the Great. Next, I'll be doing history's overrated generals, so please hit subscribe so you don't miss out, and let me know which generals you think are underrated and what generals you think are going to be in the overrated video. See you next time.